Hello, everybody. This is Nicky from Motherhood Unfiltered. It's going to be okay. And today I have guest Elle Edwards from youier.com. And she is all about building your faith, having a great time doing it in the Blue House. And it's a safe space online for being youier, away from the distraction of traditional social media. So she's here to help you thrive. And I'm so excited to talk to her. I feel like we've just really had a great connection when we did our um, prep. And then today we started just right off the bat, just chatting and, like we hadn't even, been away from each other. So I really enjoyed that. So, but I do want to remind you that if you are watching on YouTube, to comment and like the video and please share it with someone you care about. And if you're listening on podcasts, please go to Spotify or Apple iTunes and rate and review the podcast. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps let me know where I stand in the food chain. I would rather not be down in the fungus area. I want to be up toward the higher up on the food chain. So, but without further ado, here is Elle Edwards.
You made me laugh.
Sorry.
Oh, that's brilliant. Don't apologize for making me laugh. Laughing is good for you.
I know it wants to be down in the muck of the in the
Absolutely.
fungus area.
Screw me, so I'm not down in the food chain. Absolutely. This is quite true. Because if you're down there, you're going to
I
get
know the
eaten.
plankton and the amoeba has their own, spot in the universe, but
Absolutely. And I know they allege that we lose brain cells when we're pregnant, but I'm sure you've got more than one or two. So I know you have more than one or two. So I think you're high up there. You're all good. That's your silver lining for today. You have more brain cells than an amoeba. And so do all your listeners. Yay.
yeah.
Oh dear. But thank you for inviting me. It's wonderful to be here.
I know. I'm so glad that I got to meet you, and we've had such fun conversations. And
Yes.
I don't know. We've gotten off on some weird tracks too. So
Yeah, that kind of happens with me. I'm a little bit ADHD inclined, so we'll meander around all the stories and then get to the point. But it's fun doing it. So,
well, what's funny is my son was asking me where you were from, and I said, "Oh, she's from Wales," and then I'm like, "Wait a minute, I don't think that's right."
that is right. It is right. I'm not from Scotland because don't you remember? I've seen a show, and there was a show that
Oh
you'd been
yeah,
seeing. Yeah. Yeah, I am
I got
from
it
Wales.
backwards. I thought you were from where the show was.
That's right. Yeah.
You're like,
Well, I
I've
did
never
go
even
to
heard of
Scotland a
that.
couple of weeks ago, but yeah, no, I
Oh,
am from
okay.
Wales, from a town with too many consonants called Llanelli, which if you were sat next to me now, I'd spit all over you thanks to the double L at the start of that word. So it's a good sound. So there you go. Don't try that one at home.
So I wonder if the Scottish people are used to that spitting on each other and they don't even
Probably.
realize it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, this is it. And I actually don't speak Welsh. I understand a little bit. My kids all speak Welsh.
Yeah.
I gave up. I don't know if I told you this last time. I gave up when my eldest, who's now 19, was about 3, and I was practicing my Welsh over breakfast. And she said, "Mummy, you just told me to sit on my toast because I got the whatever the connecting word is wrong." I'm like, "Oh, fine. I give up." I can say Borodar and I can say the name where I live and say thank you, and that's enough. So
Well,
yeah,
I
no.
mean, don't all kids want to sit on their toast? I
Well, I
mean,
don't know. It depends if there's chocolate spread on it or not, I suppose.
so do they teach Welsh in the schools?
Yeah, so it depends on which. So the county where I live, they do have an ambition to make. I think. Oh no, that's not true. It can't be the county because there's not a million people in the county. It must be the Welsh government. There's an ambition somewhere. There's a target to help 1 million children speak Welsh by the end of their schooling. But I actually made a decision when mine were really little. How's this for forward planning? So the town where we live, there's 3 high schools, 2 English medium, 1 Welsh medium. The Welsh medium is the only one that's got a 6th form. So you stay in for like post. I don't know what you call it in America. For I don't know, the bit before university. And I was quite
High
keen to at least
school.
give them the option. What do you
Yeah,
call it?
high school.
Oh, there you go.
We have a junior high and a
Oh.
senior high.
Oh, yeah. See, here you have the
Yeah.
primary school when you're like 7 to 11. And then when you're 11 to 16, you have comprehensive school, which I translated to high school and got it wrong, as it turns out. But you can do an extra 2 years. And so I wanted to give them the option of being able to do that in school, and they could only do that if they learned Welsh. So I sent them to a primary school when they were 3 or 4. And
Oh.
anyway, so that was a little bit of advanced planning, but also it's kind of handy if you're going to stay in Wales. If you can speak Welsh, it's a little bit of an added advantage. So,
Well, I
and it's
like
good.
that.
Yeah, it's good for
I
culture.
mean,
And
because, in history, I don't know about Welsh, but, like for Ireland, they were not allowed to speak, or Scottish. I hope I don't get this wrong, but they were banned from speaking their language, and
yeah.
so it was lost.
Mm,
I mean, I just really feel like they need to stay connected to their own culture.
definitely. Yeah, my
So,
husband's grandmother, she remembers. So she's passed away now, but she would have been about 90 something now. When she was a little girl in school, they'd get smacked on the hand if they spoke Welsh. So it was actively discouraged. And it's only now they're really, now it's popular again. And I
mhm.
think probably while they're in school, they don't really appreciate it. But I think afterwards, to be able to have that there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, I
it's just
find that really interesting. I mean, so, that they are allowed to, go back to their roots and learn some of that. Because when you learn a new language, you also learn about the culture that goes around that language,
definitely. Oh
you
yeah, and
know?
it's good for your mind as well. Being bilingual, so if once you've learned one language, like my middle daughter's doing French now and things, so it has lots of benefits from that side of things. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so
Oh,
I've done my little
wow.
bit for the Welsh language by having 3 children and sending them off to Welsh school. So
Now remind me again, do you have 2 girls and a boy,
that's
or
very well remembered. I'm impressed. Yes, 2 girls and a boy, 19, 17, and 15. Where did that one come from? Whew, that was impressive. Yeah.
Well, I took a guess because you did mention 2 girls, and I was like, "Okay, I'm pretty sure she did have a boy in there somewhere."
Yeah, I definitely had a boy. Yeah, I didn't have him had a boy in the summer. Surprise! Yeah, I had him 15 summers ago. This is correct. Yeah. Oh dear me!
Yeah, I had
I
3
wish right now we
boys.
could invite all of your audience to come and sit and have a little chit chat with us, because I feel like we just sit and have a good laugh and swap war
I'm sure
stories.
they'll be chuckling when they listen to it.
Let's hope so. Yeah, and then realize actually it's going to be like you say in your tagline, it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
brilliant.
was my mantra. I definitely had to tell myself,
Yeah,
"Okay, it's not okay right now, but it's going to be okay
it is going to be okay.
sometime soon, I hope."
Absolutely. And I often say that even because, you forget, when you're pregnant the first time and you say, oh, that's so exciting. And nobody really tells you actually how much hard work it's going to be. And so I quite
Yeah.
often, when I have friends or family members or new babies, like, how are you doing? Oh, yeah, good. How are you really doing? Because the first 6 months is hell, particularly the first 3 months. But
Yeah,
I say this
yeah,
to myself: if you feel like you're doing anything better than, oh my goodness, it's hell, you're doing
yeah.
great. So, because I was dreading my kids being teenagers. I really was, mostly because I used to be a teacher and I had these
Yeah,
girls and they all hated their own mothers and loved each other's mothers. I was dreading it. But actually now, I mean, there's the odd wobble, but actually parenting teenagers for the most part is a lot more fun when they're little. At least, they
yeah,
can dress themselves and wipe their own bottoms. They answer back more, but
right.
it's a different dynamic. So you're quite right. It is going to be okay. Absolutely.
I know, right?
Yeah. Whew.
I told my kids, like, now they're all adults, and we'll talk about things, that happened and
Mhm.
probably shouldn't have happened, but
Well, yeah.
I say, "Hey, we made it out alive, okay?"
Definitely. Oh, definitely. And we're all doing the best we can with the information we have in that moment.
Yeah.
So we go back and reflect on our own journeys and things. Listen, I had this conversation with, I think, my youngest two yesterday. I said, like, in
Uh-huh.
10, 15 years' time, if you're in therapy, I apologize in advance, but just know that I love you. And I was absolutely doing the best I could in that moment. Because that's all you can do, isn't it?
Right, and they don't like, you don't I mean, you have to take a driving course to get your license,
Yes.
but you don't have to take any kind of class or course or manual to be a parent,
No.
and it's really a hard job.
Yes.
And, when I had my first one, I was so cocky about it and just arrogant. And I was like, yeah, I am totally going to smash this job and do it better than the people before me, right? Yep.
Oh,
That did not happen.
no, but at
So,
least you didn't do what I did. I tried to read all the books, and then when this
oh, I read
new
all the books
bundle,
too.
and these bundles of joy, they don't sort of like do what the book says they're meant to do when they say they're meant to do it. Like my mother one time said, "Stop reading the books. She hasn't read the books that you've read. Just relax." Oh,
I
dear.
know. I read all the books and I had all the magazines. I had 2 or 3 magazines I would read each month and I should have
Mhm.
just stopped. I really should have. But you just have to learn the hard way. And I mean, okay, so they're babies and you mess up, okay. You can come back from that. But it's the teenage part that is really hard for me
Mm.
because they're growing, their minds are developing, and they are way smarter than me. I consider myself a pretty intelligent person,
Hmm.
and they, I mean, they out argued me, and I mean, I couldn't hardly take it because I was
No. Yeah, this is why we get on so well. This sounds so familiar. My middle daughter in particular, she doesn't want to do law because you've got to do English, but she'd make a brilliant solicitor or a lawyer, as you would call them, because she can
yeah.
argue. I remember when she was little, I said, "No, look, I know for a fact in this particular point you are definitely in the wrong. You shouldn't have done that." To the point where even yesterday, my youngest was going to youth club, and I was going to give him £2 for youth club. "Oh, why are you paying for him to go to youth club?" I said, "Well, because when you were younger, I paid for you to go to netball." "Oh, okay, fair enough." I was like, "Wow, that's a diary moment. You didn't like argue back. I actually won that one. That does not happen very often at all." Woof. And she did have the graciousness to smile quite wryly and go, "Yeah."
I
Oh,
know. I mean, I don't know. They're just too much. I love them to pieces. And then now that they're adults, like with my middle son, a lot of things have come out that, he's had gotten so hurt by my parenting techniques, and so now I'm like, okay, how do I navigate this part of,
yeah.
the life or whatever, the relationship with him?
Mm,
And because, he's his own person now
yeah.
and he's, married and has, his own daughter. And so he's, voicing concerns to me and things that had happened that he
Mm,
felt like I should have prevented,
right.
but
Yeah.
if you don't know that these things have happened, I mean, how can you prevent
Yeah.
them?
Exactly. I know.
And I think it's more of a learning
Yeah.
situation for him,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I think he's at the point where I was when I first had his older brother,
Mm.
where I think I just know so much more than everybody else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, but but in those times, it can be hurtful,
Yeah. Of course.
especially to hear, when someone says that you
Mm.
totally sucked, you know.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there's a more gracious way he could have said that for sure. I was thinking in my head that it's good. It's testament to your relationship, the fact that he's even bringing it up. I guess,
Yeah,
that he has the safety to do that. So that's your
yeah.
silver lining in that. But yeah, perhaps with a bit more age and experience, he could have sort of brought it up a little bit more kindly.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe in a few more years,
I'm sure he'll learn that one. Yeah. Oh
So
dear.
tell us about, why you started your Urier. Did I say that right? Urier?
You did. My wonderful friends in America and Canada, they often have to practice this word. I had this conversation with somebody a few weeks ago. Uia. It's the IER at the end. I'm sure we talked about this backstage. It doesn't
Yeah.
quite work with the accent. And a couple of years ago, when I was trademarking, I was like, oh God, half the English-speaking countries or half they can't even say it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Like nobody knew what Google was first. It's fine. But it does give me a chance to talk about it. So that's quite good fun. So it works. But for years and years and years, UEA was all about helping you be who you were created to be. And it really comes out of my story from parenting, which is why when I first came across you, I'm like, yeah, I want to talk to this lady. Because if you'd have met me when my kids were, sort of maybe 10 years ago, even, where are we now? Not 15. Yeah. No, maybe 15 years ago. So I'm doing myself a disservice. But when my kids were little, and I remember just feeling really angry and frustrated and just found it so hard. And if I'd have gone to the GP or the family doctor at the time, they would have probably put me on medication for depression. And I've got nothing against medication. However, I do think the way I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but I suspect it has its challenges. Like here in the UK, there's a 10-minute slot. And so therefore prescriptions and medication, they'll try and fix it that way, because there isn't the time to really explore what's really going on. And I suspect there are an awful lot of people walking around with labels, either ones that they've been given by the medical professions or ones that they put, diagnose themselves thanks to Mr. Google.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but are you saying that your appointments are only 10 minutes long?
Yes. You go there with one issue, and so like if you have more than one issue, you'd have to make several appointments, and you couldn't make them until you've had. They have a very strict, because we don't pay for it directly. You see, it's not paid at point of service, is it? So therefore, it's free. In inverted commas, it's not free. We pay through taxes,
right.
Free because and which is great in as much that if one of the kids was ill, I don't need to worry about how am I going to pay for this. But at the same time, it does have its challenges, because it means that they're on a schedule. I've sat in doctors' waiting surgeries for now like an hour at a time because they're running so late. So 10 minutes. Might be 15 minutes in some practices. I mean, if there's anybody listening who's a GP, don't sue me for telling the wrong figure, but it is a very fixed
short time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And there's a sign on the doctor's surgery that my kids are registered with. There's a sign on the thing that says, on the counter thing. That's not a very good descriptive word. There's a sign on the counter that says one issue only, 10 minutes per appointment. Yeah.
I did not even know that, Elle. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I can't even get everything I want to talk about to my doctor in an hour.
Well, there you go. Yeah. But he's happy for you to do that, because he'll bill you for his time, won't he? So it's, I'm sure if my doctor could send me a bill for his time, he'd be quite happy for me to talk for an hour. His ears might be bleeding by the end of it, but
Or maybe he's like, thank God it's only 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, probably. Why do you think I talk so fast?
Okay. I'd be like, here's my list. Okay.
And the trouble is, so many bits are connected, aren't they? So actually, when you go there with one thing and it's actually not this thing, it's that thing. But yeah, one of the doctors did have me do a checklist once. They do like a check for depression and stuff. And you tick too many boxes and they don't like it very much. But but actually for me, I was putting too much pressure on myself. I was all I wanted to do, I wasn't very ambitious as a teenager. I just wanted to fall in love, get married and have kids. And I did that. But I had this idea in my head of how the ideal wife and mum should show up. It's that word should that you used earlier on. Like at the time, my niece said to you, should. Can't do shoulds. They do my head in. It's one of the most toxic words in the English language, should. So instead, it's a bit of a long story, but the short version is I happened upon a Bible weight loss course where the premise of this course was God loves you as you are. He's interested in everything. If you want to eat a Mars bar when you're not hungry, talk to God about it, because he's interested in everything. And so I was introduced to this God who loved me just as I am. Having been scared out of hell by the angry God when I was about 12, it was like night and day. It was just like this completely different thing.
I would be praying all day long.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
I love that concept, though. I know when growing up, I went to church too, and the preacher would, every once in a while, he'd have to preach about hell and damnation. I'd be like, oh, Jesus.
But why? This is one of my frustrations, and I don't suspect, I'm not traditional Christianity in some how should we say, packages do my head in.
Mhm.
He doesn't need to have to preach that, because I maintain if everybody knew just how loved by God they are, and actually
Yeah.
God as he wants to be known, we wouldn't be scaring them out of hell. They'd be running to, I want to know him too, you know. We wouldn't need to be preaching hellfire and damnation. And that kind of preaching didn't take me into relationship with God. All that did was make me pray the prayers so I didn't go to hell
Yeah.
if I died in that moment. There was no
Yeah.
relationship there. It
Yeah. I
didn't
know
change me.
it always made me run to the altar and pray and ask for
Yeah.
forgiveness for the moon pie that I stole from the grocery store when I was 10,
Yeah.
because that thing just totally
Oh,
haunted me forever, you
wow.
know?
And the thing is, right, is if they'd had a conversation with you and you'd have told them about that, you'd be like, hang on, from God's perspective, he's like, moon pie? What moon pie, Nicky? Like, he doesn't see the very first time you told him about that, he was like, yep, fine, it's forgiven. Don't worry about it anymore.
Right,
You know, we're the
exactly.
ones that keep carrying all of this stuff. It's just ugh, ridiculous. Yeah. So, but I was introduced to this loving, kind God who loved me as I am. And I'm like, well, actually, if that's good enough for him, maybe it's okay for me to love me as I am. And so I went on
Yeah,
this journey of actually, as you will have gathered by now, and I think I mentioned it, I'm a little bit sort of ADHD inclined, a little bit
yeah.
sort of off the wall, shall we say. I'm not very good at sort of playing the straight sort of, correct wife and mum. I have systems. Have we talked about this before? I have systems for like reminders and to get me to the right place. Even to be here today, I kid you not, I have it on my calendar, but I also have 3 reminders on my phone, just to make sure I don't miss stuff.
No
And
wonder
so,
we get along so well.
yeah,
I
exactly.
do the same thing.
Yeah. And so that's where Yuya was born. It was actually recognizing, do you know what? If everybody could just be who they were created to be, and some people are quieter, some people are more serious, some people are a little bit off the wall. We're multifaceted. I am actually quiet
Yeah.
sometimes. I know that shocks people,
Wait a
particularly in
minute,
this
is that
context.
when you're asleep?
Yeah, that's when I'm asleep. And even then, I sometimes talk to myself. So. Yeah. But it changed. It was like night and day for me. It changed. It made me be who I was all along. And so that's how Yuya happened. And so for years and years, it was all about helping people who be who you really are, until
Mhm.
April 2021, when, okay, sorry, rewind slightly. What I'm about to say will sound off the wall to some of your listeners. We're going to just say, for those, I don't know where your listeners are with faith stuff, just take what I'm saying as read and recognize you can insert your own language into what I'm about to say. So having parked that, because I don't want anybody listening to get hung up on language, because God does not get hung up on language. Having
Right.
said that, so having prayed the prayer when I was 12 and been loved into heaven in my sort of early 20s, back at the end of 2019, I asked God my very first question, and I started having conversations with Holy Spirit. And so some people would call that hearing voices. I'm like, yes, I hear voices. It's God. But some people would say that's like weird. So that's hence why I gave my caveat. So during one of my times of journaling, I had in April 2021, Holy Spirit said, Yuya? And I said, yes. He said, ask me for an acronym. I said, okay, could I have an acronym, please? He said, okay, yes, that's a good question, Elle. I said, thank you very much. He said, Yuya is you, the person I created you to be, plus IER. I went, okay, what's IER? IER is intentional, expectant relationship. And it was all about helping people step into recognizing that everybody can hear from God. If they have a relationship with Jesus, it's not the remit of like super holy people. And then the relationship part, but also being intentional, actually choosing to ask God questions, choosing to step into this relationship. And so that's why I'm really excited when people like fall over the IER, because the IER is actually a really important part of it. And I would maintain if we just did the IER, the you bit would take care of itself. Because if I'm talking to God and I say, God, I feel like I should bake. I'm sure I gave this example last time we spoke, but I'm going to use it again because it makes me chuckle. If I said, okay, God, I'm gonna bake bread for every single person on my street. What do you think about that? And he'd be like, are you sure that's a good idea? You tend to forget things. You've burnt past more than once. Are you sure that's a great idea? And I'm like, yeah, you're right, God, that's not a great idea. Invite your mum round. She can help you because she's great at making bread. So actually, if we walk in relationship and having these ongoing conversations, relationship, like the relationship I have with my best friend, which I know sounds mental to some people because I know you can't see God directly.
Yeah.
Then the how to be ourselves piece, it takes care of itself. So that in
Right.
essence is the round the world story of how we get to Yuya and where I am today. So
I love that, Elle. I mean, it's your personal experience in your relationship with God, and you're using it to help other people because some people don't even know where to begin.
yes,
They don't
absolutely.
know where to start to have their own relationship with God.
Yeah.
And and I mean, even though I may not be able to say you're right,
It doesn't
but
matter. Doesn't matter.
but I know what it means, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just, I mean, and not every message is for every person. So
No.
we have to have a diversity of people
Oh, yeah.
to, those people will connect with you, and
Mhm.
there's people that connect with me, because they might feel more kindred with you or whatever it
Mhm.
is. And I just like that you're using that to help those around you. And it's such a great message.
Thank you. It reminded me, actually, there was a phrase I came across in a book just this week that talked about our relationship with God. And actually, they say it's personal, but it shouldn't be private. I was like, well, that's interesting, because it is.
Uh-huh.
Everybody's relationship is personal. Like, I have my own
Yeah.
journey with God and my own stories, but I'm not.
Right.
If I just keep that to myself, that's incredibly selfish, and that's not actually really kind of how Jesus did it at all. So I almost my why behind everything, having had this kind of like aha moment, is
Yeah.
although it's really hilarious to me, when I was really grumpy and frustrated, I was in the exact same house with the exact same husband and the exact same kids. I mean, the walls weren't yellow, they were a different color, but like it was the same location. And yet as a person, I feel like it's like night and day. And I have times when I'm miserable, don't get me wrong, like
Yeah.
anybody who tells you they're happy all of the time is lying or they're on something. But
Right.
for the
Right.
most part, life is joyful, life is good. I like being
Yeah.
alive. And so why would I keep that to myself? And it starts on a smaller level in my household, and my kids sometimes like, "Oh, mum, just be quiet," because that's what kids do. But like,
Yeah.
it starts on a smaller level, my household, my town. But because of the joys of the internet, like I connect with people like literally all over the world,
I know.
Singapore,
Yeah.
Canada, South Africa. It's
Yeah.
glorious that we get to do this. And it makes life, like you say, more diverse and more fun.
Yeah.
Um, I had this nudge to mention as well. You're getting a behind the scenes first thing. Nobody knows this apart from me and God. Okay, this is a
Ooh.
big secret. No, it's not a big secret. It's a secret related to my website. It's pertaining to your thing about like, how do I start? What I would
Yeah.
say, if anybody, because I have a little book called Yuya,
Uh-huh.
which the minute you can buy on Amazon, but I had a bit of a nudge from Holy Spirit in the week sometime. It was available for free. We had a party in August, and I'm going to be updating things so people can get an electronic copy for free. So
Uh-huh.
at some point over the next couple of weeks, if there's and I don't know when this goes out anyway, but hopefully by the time this goes out, if you go to uia.com, somewhere on there'll be a place where if you want to, you can get your free copy of Uia. I'm not saying
Oh,
it's the way to hear from God, because obviously there's so many different ways that people step into a relationship with him, but
right.
it's a nice, easy read. If I had it in front of me, I'd show you. It's a little tiny book. It
Yeah.
explores the IER, and then it basically gives you lots of questions. And if there's a thing called the should shover challenge, which is what we talked about, where, helping people ditch the shoulds, because I think should is a terrible toxic word, as I already mentioned. But I was nudged to mention that to you in case there is anybody like, I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
I would invite you to check it out. And even if you read it and go, yeah, that's a load of nonsense, I don't believe that. Fine. It could all be part of your journey. It won't take you very long to read it. So
So what was your idea, persona of a mom, a wife, when
that's a
you
good question. Yeah. She's probably the complete opposite of me. No, that's not true. Actually, she was to this ideal wife and mum to me. The expectations I put on myself, in one sense, on paper, they're decent things. So it was about getting the kids to school on time with the things that they needed.
Yeah.
Everybody washed and dressed and fed, and the stuff that we're meant to do. It's not that
Yeah.
that stuff is bad stuff. It's just that trying to do it all, we have this, I don't know whether it's just we put it on ourselves, but I think society does it a little bit, that we're super mum, we do all of these things, and then even it's really bad, we like our husbands or partners will maybe look after the kids for a bit, and we thank them when they're their kids too, like, what's that about? It's nonsense. I mean, and part of it as well, because we made a decision as a couple that I would be home with the kids, and we were positioned that we could do that
Yeah.
financially. And so I also felt, well, actually, if my husband's been at work all day, then I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Chapman's love languages, but acts of
Yes.
service is one of his love languages. And so him coming home to a nice, tidy house, even if he didn't recognize it as such, was a way that I could show him that he was loved. The trouble is, acts of service is probably low down on my list of love languages. And so I had to try really hard. And so I remember quite often at like 5 o'clock, I'd be running around like a lunatic, trying to get the house tidy. It's just a lot of pressure. And the irony is, now that the kids are older, like I am quite minimal. I'm looking around the room. I was about to say I'm quite minimalist. That's not true. I like stuff.
Which is why my background is blurred, because I so try to be a minimalist and it's just not working out for me.
Oh,
so
no. I mean, all of my things now, they have memories attached, and that's my sort of like, I don't know, whatever word I'm looking for there.
That's a struggle.
Yeah. But I do, now that they're older, I do like having the house sort of clutter free and it be nice and clean and tidy. Mm-hmm. But the difference is I'm in a different season, and nobody really talks about the seasons that we're in when we're parenting. When your kids are little, I mean, I had 3 kids under 5, and it was just like 0, 2, and 4. And expecting the house to be immaculate, it was all this pressure I was putting on myself. And so in one sense, it's no wonder I was slowly going a little bit crazy, because it was just too much.
Yeah, it is too much. And I totally remember those days. I did try to work, and then I ended up staying home with the boys. And before their dad and I had divorced. And then after the divorce, I had to work, and I think I just went bonkers from there. Yeah. But it's just, you just do the best that you can. I just think that, I try to believe in, being a feminist. And it was something I always thought I wanted to be. But I feel like in trying to be a feminist, like you said, it's just too much pressure.
Yeah.
I can't work. I can't take care of kids and take care of my house and my husband.
And take care of yourself.
And take care of myself. I mean, something's got to give. It's just too much.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to make a decision and prioritize, what's more important. So
you probably are a feminist. I think it depends on your definition of it, isn't it? Like, I suspect it's one of those words I'm like, well, what do we actually mean by this? Because, are we talking about burning our bras and running through the streets and not shaving our legs and whatever, or what do we actually mean by that? Are we standing up for the fact that actually women have rights too? And so for too long, their voices haven't been heard. Well, what are you doing on this podcast? You are giving voice to yourself. You are giving voice to other women. So you are a feminist. It's just about redefining it, because even that label feminist, once it got out there, like, I don't blame it on the men, but it's society then, shall we say, will take that label and use it as a stick to beat us with, And so what if we go, I'm not a big fan of labels in general. I mean, I'll be quite honest. Because we are so multifaceted, I struggle with labels. But you're quite right. This idea that we should have it all is really, it's a lot to live up to. It's a lot of pressure. And does send a lot of us quite loopy.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And to me, my definition of a feminist is, standing up for your rights and making sure that, people are treated equally. Yeah. However, I realize my own limitations.
Yeah.
There's no way that I could, at this point in my life, be a fireman. I can't pick anybody up. I can barely pick 50 pounds up, right? So, I mean, it's just, I think, and I don't want to put anybody down who, totally believes that they are actually weaker, but I have just seen too many situations where a woman has been in a, like in law enforcement or military or whatever, and they've totally been overpowered.
Yeah.
By, a man. Yeah. And it doesn't take that much. I just think that, we definitely need to realize our limitations.
Yeah.
And not put ourselves down if we think that we're less than something else.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And actually, I think of it like, I'm reminded of lots of things, ADHD brain, but like, I'm reminded of like in Genesis, Adam and Eve, like there's a guy called Chris Valentin, who I don't know, some of your listeners may be familiar with him. He comes out of Bethel Church, and he did some teaching on femininity and on womanhood. And he has this teaching. And again, I'm still like, okay, that's interesting. So when Adam was first created, he was created in the image of God. Like, so therefore he would have had his masculine and his feminine, because God is all of that. And then when Eve was taken from him for woman to be created, man lost something, that femininity, that the intuition aspect that we get. So many things actually we get told that, oh no, you can't use that, but that the
Yeah.
womanhood part of it. And so actually we're not meant to be the same. We're two halves of a whole that are meant to complement each other, whether that's in
Yeah.
work relationships or in partnerships, in families, or whatever that looks like. We
Mhm.
shouldn't, I don't think we should be trying to treat everybody the same. Like, I don't know about you, I'm sure you don't treat all of your children the same. You treat them how fits with who they are. And so I
Right.
don't,
Right.
I tried very hard not to parent. I mean, my youngest in particular, hates raised voices. You can speak in a firm voice and he thinks he's having a massive, great big row. He's getting out of it now. He's 15. But when he was younger, whereas my middle daughter then, who's much feistier, she's a strong leader, had no problem with shouting whatsoever. And I'm like, but to the point where you picture. My point being, we don't parent all of our children the same. So why?
Right.
It's not about doing it the same. It's about fairness and treating them within the context of who they are. And so that's what
Yeah.
we need, because you're quite right. I
Yeah.
mean, like, my husband's a police officer, and so they do have female police officers. You
Mhm.
can't send, I mean, okay, I'm about to contradict myself. If you send a smaller petite police officer into a great big fight and actually expect her to get in there and fight, it doesn't usually end well.
Yeah.
However, I would maintain that she could probably talk her way out of that situation, because she has a different skill set. And so actually
Yeah.
we can bring all of this stuff in together, but
Yeah.
if we allow people to operate within, again, it's the Yuya thing, allow people to operate within actually who they were created to be and how they best work.
Mhm.
I mean, my husband's 6'5". He's only had maybe 1 or 2 fights in his whole life, his whole career, because he is a
Mhm.
talker and he's got a big heart. And so he talks, well, more often than not, connect with people. He doesn't go in there,
Oh,
because that suits his personality. And so we
yeah.
don't need everybody treated the same. We need people to be treated fairly, absolutely, kindly,
Yeah.
absolutely, with love
Mhm.
and compassion, recognizing that we are all different and have different skills and nuances to how we show up in the world.
Wow, that's a great explanation. I mean, so even if physically you may not be up to snuff, but mentally and emotionally you are.
Oh yeah,
You could definitely complement, the other people around you with
definitely.
that,
And
with
actually, if
that
you think
skill
about,
set.
absolutely. And if you think about the volatile situations like with police officers, I would maintain that we would have a lot less of the conflict and the fighting. Again, this is generalizations,
Mhm.
but actually if we went in there with that conversational approach,
Mhm.
that would change the dynamic. I mean,
Mhm.
I use this as a daft example, but we were sanding our floors earlier in the summer, and I somehow managed, just by being me and having conversation, we had the floor sand for like 50 quid when it should have been 150 quid or something stupid. And the
Mhm.
guy came and said, I would never have had that for that. And I'm like, well, I was just talking to him, and he just, I don't know, like, I can't tell you what I did. It wasn't like witchcraft or anything. It was just conversation. And it was the best one in the world. I said, I'm not like I'm some skinny little young thing, batting my eyelids. I just have conversation. And so there's power in us being actually who we are, and just showing up in all of that.
He
If
thought
it's,
you was being a smeister
I think
or
so, yeah. I've never heard that word schmeister before, but I think it's probably a little bit
a
like flirt. Is that?
cheater, like a
Oh, a
cheater.
cheater. There you go. No, yeah. Yeah. Oh dear. I maintain I flirt with everybody. I flirt with life. This is what you see is what you get. Doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, that's what happens when you use kindness and respect other people, no
Yes.
matter who they are.
Oh yeah,
I
totally.
mean, they recognize that, and a lot of times they will go out of their way to help you out,
Yeah. Oh,
you
definitely.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, I know for sure.
So,
There was another thought that sort of sauntered across my awareness, but it's gone again now. If it comes back, I'll remember. I don't know what it was. When you get these little, it goes, and I'm like, okay, I don't remember. It was a little, it just sort of like, it just crawled along in my mind, and it's gone again. So it's like a little bird. If I try and grab it, it'll fly away even quicker. So it was
you're a
important. It will
mess.
it will make its way back, I'm sure.
So what does your husband think about, this whole, journey that you're on? Does he I mean, does he think, "Okay, there she goes again," or is he like, it's a
That's
great thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So he doesn't have a relationship with Jesus at the moment, and so for him, quite a lot of the stuff he says, like we'll have conversations like this, and he'll go, "Yeah, no, I agree with that." But he does it from the place of, well, I don't actually believe that God exists. However, if he did, da 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 da, da, like and so yeah, okay. But then he sometimes says to me, "Well, what would God say?" I'm like, "Okay, this from the guy who says God doesn't exist." No, but um, it's fascinating to me that, I mean, because I am me and I recognize that I
Yeah.
do have a lot to say a lot of the time, there are
Uh,
occasions where, like, particularly like, if you're out shopping, it's like, could you just be like, just quiet for a moment? Do you have to engage with every single person? Whereas for me, having worked in a supermarket and knowing how frustratingly boring it can be, I
yeah.
find it really easy to connect with people. And I
Right.
find that point of connection, and just, we can have conversations. I can have conversation with random strangers till the cows come home.
Yeah.
Um, that's an idiom. I don't know if that translates into that's not a real literally cows come home. In case you've got any like international listeners going, cows come home, I'm not familiar with that. Anyway, sorry, I digress. So I love it. Like when I'm in the supermarket and I'll just, because he's like, but it doesn't make a difference. I'm like, well, in that moment, it does make a difference. You
Yeah.
make people smile in that moment. You make them feel good in that
Yeah.
moment. So there
Yeah.
are occasions where him and probably some of the children will be like, oh, could you just stop for a minute? But then we have occasions where like I find something out that they needed to know, or we get discounts on floor
Yeah.
sanders, or there's benefits from me being me, and they're like, oh, actually,
Yeah.
yeah, that's quite good, that's useful.
Right. Right.
So I mean, they haven't got any choice now at this point. I'm 44, and you try and sort of stop me from being me, it's not going to happen. Having said that, though, I do have the ability to moderate my language for the occasion. So if I showed up at a funeral, I am quiet, and so
Mhm.
there are obviously occasions where you do need, excuse me, where you do need to be sensible. So
Yeah.
but so I can moderate myself. It's just,
Right.
why would I if I don't have to? Yeah, but no, in fairness, he's we've been married for, what is it, 22 years now. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, he knows what I'm like. Recognizing that I am different to the woman that he married, which
Right.
obviously, probably isn't what he signed
Yeah.
up for,
He
but
obviously loves you because he's still
he does.
sticking around.
Exactly. Yes. He's not
He's like,
here
"What
because
is
his
this
his
woman
arm
gonna
is
do
twisted
next?"
behind his back. Yeah. No, true.
That's hilarious. I love that. I just, yeah, I mean, I my husband, he's like, "Well, that's who you are," and
Mhm.
but I do try to, self, um, reflect, I guess, and
Mhm.
just realize, okay, maybe I shouldn't be so brash, or maybe I shouldn't be so outspoken during certain situations, and
Mhm.
so I mean, we all realize that there are things that we need to work on,
Oh,
and
yeah.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
always have a list of things I need to work on.
Right.
Sometimes I look at the list, sometimes I
Mhm.
acknowledge it, and sometimes I actually work on it. So,
But also as well, how much of that list is actually stuff that, like, is actually important? Because
yeah.
there's definitely a balance to be had, isn't there, between, yes, okay, we're absolutely growing as people. I'm not the same
Mhm.
person that I was, I don't know, a month ago even. Like, we
Mhm.
grow and we learn and all the rest of it. I'm not against growing and developing. And that's the thing as
Yeah.
well, because the danger, if you say, oh, well, that's just the way I am, then that gives me an excuse to always speak without thinking, and always, and actually no, that's some immature version of who I am. I
Yeah.
can engage
Yeah.
my brain, so there's definitely room for growth. But particularly where ex-husbands are concerned, I have no experience with ex-husbands, but I have an experience with life. And my instinct tells me that any list that are like that, I would take it with a pinch of salt initially, and then go back to it and reflect on it and go, okay, if I work on these areas, does it light me up? And does this make me a happier person? Or is this purely for, like, keeping the peace for the people around me? Which sometimes we
Yeah.
need to do. I recognize that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a balance to be struck, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, of course, my list has changed over the year. I would definitely agree with the list I had after I first divorced is
Mm,
not the same list that I have now,
yeah, of
and, things change over time
course.
and stuff, but I definitely it took a lot of learning and practicing, to be able to talk to people without them feeling like I
Mm,
just belittled them and cut them down, and that was something I had to learn the hard way, like through where I work,
Yeah.
so many people. I mean, if they knew me, it didn't bother them, but, like, people who didn't know me, it really upset them,
Mm.
because they would ask me a question, and I would say yes or no.
Yeah.
And they would go crying like, "She hates me."
Oh, no. Oh, so you're talking about people like you're not tolerating idiots and they can't cope with it. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no, I do recognize that. There's sometimes one of the most humbling things ever is when you notice certain character traits in one of your offspring and you realize, oh, yes, that's me. Like one of mine in particular, she'll say something and it comes out as really a little bit arrogant and a little bit, sort of, and I'm like, I'm saying to her dad, she doesn't mean it like that because I can see that in myself. Like there's
Yeah.
the number of times over the years where I've said something. Or the other thing that I'll do, which drives him crazy, see, like I do something wrong, and I'll go, and
Uh-huh.
I know I've done something wrong, and I'll recognize that and say sorry, but I want to explain why it happened. And it's not me trying to make excuses; it's me just giving an explanation. But what he hears is me
Yeah.
making excuses.
Yeah.
And so there's so many layers to this, isn't there? And then we
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
recognize that people come with their own stories and their own sort of like kind of
Right,
nuances of
yeah.
how they've done life. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I recognize that too. Sometimes I say things, and for me, I find typing. If ever you have any conversation with me via typing, you'll see I litter it with emojis because I find typing, whether it's chat or email, because it can come across really like because I'm very matter of fact, dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun,
Uh-huh.
and that can come across like you're saying, quite cold.
Yeah,
So I'll chuck in a
yeah.
whole load of emojis to try and soften it. Whereas if I had that conversation face to face, where you can do body language and you'll see that I'm smiling and you can
Mhm.
ask questions. I
Yeah.
just think that's one of the frustrations of the age that we live in, and
Yeah, yeah.
it doesn't always end well.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, I can only put so many pleases and thank yous and
Mm,
smiley faces, in a response,
yeah.
around the word yes, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
But
but
my boys' dad, he's like,
yeah.
one of the boys that got in trouble at school for, um, talking back, you
Oh,
know,
right.
and was being just being a smart, aleck, or whatever.
Mm.
But I was talking to his dad about it. He's like, they get that from you, the way they're responding. I'm like, yes, I know, but I need you to help me with this.
Yeah. But the difference is, see, in a few years' time, that will be an attribute that's recognized. This is one of the frustrating things with the education system. It's only set up to channel down a certain path. I remember my
Mhm.
son, he's now 15, when he was 4, coming home in tears from school. I was, what's the matter? Oh, they made me put my backpack on my back and they gave me a row because I didn't want to wear it on both shoulders. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. Why are we giving our children a row is a Welsh word for being told off. Why are we scolding our
Yeah,
children because they won't wear their backpack on 2 shoulders? We're trying to funnel them down this particular path. And woe
yeah,
betide you if you don't fit that path or you want to ask why. And yet when we're
right.
adults, these are the kind of attributes that are celebrated. It's good
Yeah,
to ask why and explore. They call it out of the box thinking. It's like, well, we can't have out of the box thinking if we don't let our young people also do this. And so,
mhm.
yeah, it's
Oh,
just
I know.
frustrating.
I know. Trust me, I know all about that nonsense. And it happens here too. And I just I mean, I could just go on forever about, some of the things, the end or the conflicts, or the being
Mm,
hypocritical about, you have to do this, but yet,
mm,
not all the kids were made to do the same thing.
yeah.
So we just had that all over the place, and I was
Mm.
just so fed up with it. And I'm
Or
just,
keeping the whole class in because a handful of kids have been naughty. That drives me crazy too. I'm
oh
like, just because you
yeah.
can't have got the right discipline strategies, you can't identify who did it. Why are we keeping everybody in? This is ridiculous.
My
Oh,
mom used to do that. There's 5 of us, and
right,
sometimes I could tell when she's like, she just had enough, because if one of us did something, we all got it.
right, yeah.
She would line us up, all 5 of us, and make us bend over, and we get our butt whacked,
So
smacked.
where are you in the lineup of the 5? Because I'm the eldest of 6. I didn't know we had this in big. I didn't know we had big
I'm
families
the
in common.
oldest. I'm the
Ah,
oldest. Yeah.
there you
And
go.
so I know, right?
Yeah,
And
there
then
you
my
go.
brother, so there's 2 older girls, then my brother, and then 2 younger girls. And
Oh,
So and she admits this now that she did not discipline him, like she should have. But
Mm.
he got by with so much more stuff,
Oh, boys
because
generally
he
do
was the
tend to.
boy.
Mm.
And but anyway, now he's paying for it because he don't he's been such a criminal.
Oh, no. Oh, bless him.
I know. He gets lots of prayers.
Oh, love
But,
him.
being the oldest, my mom, and she was single for the majority of our time growing up, she
Mm.
put so much responsibility on my
Yeah.
shoulders. And I just when I became a teenager, I just wanted to get the heck out of the house,
Yeah.
because I thought I don't even want to be part of this family. This
Mm.
family is nuts, right? And so and that's when I developed, a relationship with God. It was when I was um young and up through teenage years. And
Mm.
I just um I just struggled with um and now as an adult I realized that I was just being, a vain person, but I was a teenager.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what I looked like on the outside was really important. And so my family did not fit in with that,
Right.
what I wanted it to look like,
Sure.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, that was just silly,
But
you
I think
know.
that's quite normal, isn't it? Because you're as a teenagers, like our minds are not finished forming for one thing, but we're also
Mhm.
trying to figure out where do we fit in the world. And I
Mhm.
imagine actually there's so much more pressure. We didn't have social media, but
Yeah.
that pressure is escalated now, isn't it? This idea of
Yeah.
again it goes back to this picture of what the ideal wife and mum should look like. It's
Yeah.
what should the
Yeah.
perfect woman look like?
Yeah.
So don't be too hard on yourself because we've all
Oh,
done it.
yeah.
And it was that we are a product of where we've come from. We don't have to be bound by that. We can be free of our stories, but
Uh-huh.
it's all part of the conditioning, isn't it? There's a certain way
Yeah.
that women should show up and they should look and they should behave. So
Yep.
yeah, talking about not fitting the picture. I don't know if your family had. We had a minibus, right? And my younger siblings and their friends loved the minibus, but I hated it as a teenager. When I moved to Wales and being transported everywhere, particularly because our minibus, the first one, was just covered in rust, and it was so embarrassing. And so you'd rock up anywhere in this minibus, and so talk about like the picture not matching, like did not match how I wanted to show up in the world. Oh my word, yeah, I can sympathize with that one.
I
Ugh.
know, but your mom and dad had 6 kids. I mean,
Well, I know. I understand the transport issues of that many people, but still, it was just so embarrassing. Oh dear, it was awful. And my friends all loved it. They quite loved coming in the minibus. I'm like, oh. My only good thing was when we went to the big school. We lived out of town, so I came in on a bus. They didn't have to take me to school every day, so that was quite good. I just wanted to be anonymous as a teenager, which is ironic now because I love talking to everybody. But as a teenager, I just did not want to put my head above the parapet. I just wanted to just disappear and
yeah.
hide
Yeah.
because I did not like being a teenager. It was a difficult time. So
I didn't either.
no, but we
I
survived it. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
I just the whole thing of your minibus story just reminds me of my 2 younger sisters. My mom, had this car, and it it was horrible. It was a teeny tiny car,
Mhm.
and I don't know if it was a Sunfire. It was a
Okay.
two-door car, but the driver door would not stay shut.
Oh no.
So
Well, even when she's driving down the road.
yeah.
Oh no. So she's like,
So
"Arr!"
she turned the corner, it would just fly open.
Oh no.
And she would take my sisters to the school, and they would make they would make her drop them off like 3 blocks from the school so nobody would see the
Yeah.
car.
Oh yeah.
But it was just, I mean, things like that, is just so hilarious. And I think that's, in the end, that stuff just builds character. At the time, yeah, it was probably embarrassing, but now it's
Yeah.
like, oh, let me tell you about this funny story,
It makes
so
for great stories, absolutely, yeah. And then when my kids
yeah.
say I'm embarrassing, I'm like, well, it could be worse, you know.
We could be driving a minibus to
We
school.
could, yeah. And the thing is, I think I hadn't recognized, and I only recognize it now as a parent, of teenagers, is actually my parents never actually went out of their way to embarrass me. They just did it by accident because I'm
Yeah.
so good at embarrassing my kids, and I try really hard not to, but it just happens. So, but again, they're friends. Think it's hilarious, and but
Yeah.
then the thing, me being me, then you can see I'll say something, and then they're all laughing, and I'm like, "Don't you laugh?" I said, "Because if this was in your house and it was your mother, you'd be cringing too." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's true."
Yeah.
So I'll call them out on it, and it's all part of the banter. Then it's quite a good laugh. But
Yeah.
no, it's just bonkers.
Well, before we disconnect here, do you have any last bits of advice for the audience?
There was one piece that, not the piece that flitted across my mind and left. When we were talking about lists, I was just given this really strong reminder that God does not have a list of the things he wants to change about you. It was that reminder, not just you and I in this
Oh.
room, but also you as in the listeners, is actually his list is full of the things that he adores about you and the things about you that make him smile. And so for
Aw.
anybody listening who needs that reminder of, oh, I just don't know if anybody loves me. You are loved. You're loved by people you don't even know, but
Yeah.
God loves you. And I know that can sometimes come across, oh yeah, God loves you. It sounds a bit trite. I don't mean it in a trite way. I just felt it really
Mhm.
strongly in my spirit. He's like, I don't
Mhm.
have a list. Yes, you want to grow, and yes, but I want to grow in my relationship with you. I'm not
Mhm.
interested in lists. There's nothing I want to change about you. I simply want to
Mhm.
grow in getting to know you. So he does not have a list. And so that's the one piece that was strongest on my spirit, that was
Mhm.
there as a piece that would not go away. So when you said that,
Mhm.
that's what I wanted to remind people, because
Well,
God loves this idea of love. I mean, conversation for another time about how our religion has been influenced by ancient Greek philosophy and our pictures of God.
yeah.
And that's another conversation for another time. We won't go down that like over. But just understand that those people who are like, oh, I don't know if I believe in God. I would ask you, well, what God do you not believe in? Because I probably don't believe in him either. Yeah,
Yeah.
he is love. And that's the
Yeah.
foundational piece of all of that. And love in its most beautiful, pure form, not love as in like I love ice cream, or love as in
Right.
like, I'm going to touch a boob in a
Yeah,
nasty way. That's not
exactly.
love. That's
Yeah.
abuse.
Right.
Actual, real, pure love. That's where we start with God, and He does not have a list. He simply wants
Oh.
to draw you into relationship.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much for
It's my
sharing
absolute
that.
pleasure.
And how can we get a hold of you if we want to download your free ebook if it's available by the time this is
I will make
out?
sure it is. It will be a priority. It won't be done today or tomorrow, but it will be done only because I get to go visit another church I've only been to once before, and I'm preaching somewhere tomorrow. So it won't be today or tomorrow, but I will make it, because of this conversation, I shall make it a priority for the start of next week. It will be available.
Okay.
So if people go to uia.com, somewhere on the homepage there will be a thing, there'll be a box so you can get the book. I do
Uh-huh.
have a Facebook page. I don't have Instagram anymore. I got hacked. That's a whole story for another time. So I do have a Facebook page where you can follow along a little bit.
Yeah.
But I would go to Uia and get the book and start there, because it's free and
Okay.
it's lovely. And you get, the thing is as well, it's not filtered. Facebook, you might miss stuff. So yeah, that would
Yeah.
be, start there.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope that we can definitely do this again
Yeah, I
in
would
the
love to.
future.
Absolutely. No, it's always fun. It's just, like I said, like we said earlier on, it's just sitting around having a little chat with one of my friends. It's all
I
good.
know. I love it. I absolutely love it. So
No, it's my pleasure.